Hello everybody, welcome to the Driver Trainer channel. I'm glad you can join us for this fifth of 5 video defensive driving series, and I'm glad you're able to stick with it the entire time. After this video, I'm going to be diving into some other interesting topics that you won't want to miss. Now let's get right into it. You can do everything right out there on the road, as I've taught you in the last 4 videos, but if others don't know what you're doing, risk still exists. So far in the previous videos, we talked about looking ahead, we've talked about staying aware, we've also talked about keeping our eyes moving, and we've also talked about maintaining space. Now we're going to finish it with something just as important, and that is communicating your intentions to everyone around you. So how do we do that? And what does communicating your intentions mean? Simply put, it means letting other drivers know what you're about to do. It also means making your actions predictable. Because simply put, good drivers don't surprise people, and the goal is to make your next move more obvious. How can we make our next move more obvious? Well, number one, when we're turning or making lane changes, we need to use our turn signals properly. We need to use them all the time when we are turning or lane changing, and we need to use them legally and properly. We need to signal early, not the last second, like some people may do, or not use it at all. We want to avoid that because that's where we definitely run into problems and confusion or possibly road rage. So we want to be using our turn signals every time that vehicle is turning. And we don't just use them when we feel like using them. We want to make sure we are signaling before hitting the brake pedal or making the turn, not while we're doing these activities. Then also brake communication, because brake lights are a form of communication. Let's talk about smooth braking versus sudden braking. When you brake early and smoothly, you're telling drivers behind you what's happening, because last second braking causes confusion and risk. The only time we need to do last second braking is in an emergency situation where that is the only resort. Not as a part of a driving pattern of that's just how we drive. We just wait till we get up to the intersection, we brake at the last minute, we make our turn, because if we brake at the last minute, we are more efficient, blah, blah, blah. No. Get rid of that mentality, because that's where you run into problems. Not only with the communication, but you also run into problems with people not ready to stop behind you, especially those who are tailgating. So let's get that mentality out of our mind and start braking smoother and sooner. Plus, if you brake smoother and sooner, you're going to save money by not having a premature brake job. Now let's look at eye contact and awareness with other drivers, especially useful in city driving. What kind of situations would eye contact be useful? When you're encountering pedestrians, you want to give them eye contact, and hopefully they'll give you eye contact so both of you are aware of each other's presence. That way you know that the pedestrian is aware of what you're doing and he's aware that you're there and that he can safely cross. Also, when you encounter other drivers at intersections, especially if you're at a red light at a 4-way intersection or even a 2-way intersection where you don't have a stop sign but the other guy does, you definitely want to maintain eye contact there, so that way the person who's required to stop for you recognizes that you're there coming through the intersection, and that body language indicates that that person is going to stop or hopefully stop. Now, as far as eye contact, I'm not saying we need to have a staring contest or do any special winks or give the mean eye or anything. We're just using our vision to engage our presence. Say, hey, I'm here. Because if you can make eye contact, you can confirm that they see you. Never assume someone sees you. You want to look for that confirmation. Also, positioning as communication. This adds a higher level concept, and it's very important that your vehicle is positioned in a way that it sends a signal to other drivers, because lane placement, speed, and spacing all communicate. And here are some examples of that. Slowing down early before a turn, or positioning for a lane change by making sure you're in the proper position. Also, leaving space to let someone merge. Because sometimes what you do with your vehicle says more than your turn signal says. What happens when drivers don't communicate? Well, here's some common issues that can happen, which include sudden lane changes, last second turns, confusion at intersection, or near misses due to unpredictability. Everything that happens should be predictable and should be known. And that's why communication is very important on the road. Even though it's going to be nonverbal communication, it's very important that you utilize the proper nonverbal communication out on the road. Let me state this to everybody. Most frustration on the road comes from not knowing what someone else is about to do. So it's very important we make our intentions known and that we communicate what we are doing when we're out on the road. Now, how can we be predictive and consistent? We want to avoid sudden, unexpected moves when we're out on the road. We also want to keep our actions smooth and consistent because consistency builds trust between drivers, while erratic driving creates uncertainty, and that's where a lot of problems start. Let me give you some real-world situations that this can be applied. Lane changing. When you make a lane change, you need to put your turn signal on 2 to 3 seconds before you even start the lane change. In fact, believe it or not, by law, you must have your turn signal on for a minimum of 2 seconds before you start that lane change. 3 seconds would be more ideal. Now, how do I know that? Because I have seen somebody on a live police show, and there was an episode where somebody was stopped because they did not have their turn signal on for 2 seconds. They just flipped the lever, moved over, like people seem to do all the time. This police officer stopped the vehicle and explained that by law, you need to have your turn signal on for a minimum of 2 seconds before that vehicle moves over. Now, I don't know if that person received a ticket or if it was just a warning. I believe it was just a warning, and it was more of an educational stop. But that did happen, and that can happen to anyone else. So make sure that turn signal is on for at least 2 seconds minimum before that vehicle moves over. And while that turn signal is flashing, that's when you need to start checking your surroundings to make sure it is safe to make that lane change. Once it's safe to move over, then you start moving smoothly, and it should be 5 to 7 second process to move that vehicle over. You do not want to jerk the vehicle over and get that vehicle into the next lane in 1.1 seconds like we're trying to break a record, because you're going to break more than a record if we continue a pattern of quick lane changes like that, including rollover collisions. And if a police officer sees you making a lane change like that, that can be considered as erratic driving, and that will give you more tickets than what you want to pay for. So always make them smooth and take your time moving over. That way we don't have risks of rollover collisions and we don't appear to be driving erratically. How about intersections when you're making a turn? We want clear signals. The law requires you signal at least 100 feet before your turn in city or urban areas, or at least 200 feet in rural areas. Now, you do want to be careful with signaling way too early, especially if there are public easements like parking lots, driveways, where somebody is coming out of the easement, because you don't want that person to think you're going to turn into the same easement they are coming out of, especially if you're turning on, say, you're on Main Street and you're going to turn right onto Pine Street, and just before Pine Street is the easement to the First National Bank of America or McDonald's. You don't want people to think you're going to turn into that bank or into that restaurant. You want people to know you're turning on to the next street ahead at the intersection. So you want to make sure you wait until you pass that easement before you flip that turn signal on. Make sure you control your speed, slow down smoothly. Don't wait till the last minute and apply the brakes when you're, say, 10 foot from the intersection. No, that should be several hundred feet back where you're gradually slowing down, especially in higher speed limit areas. We shouldn't wait to the last minute, and then in 30,000 miles, we wonder why we need new brake pads. And always make eye contact when possible to make sure people are aware you're turning right, they see you, and you see them, because when you're both engaged, then you know you have communication with both you and the other driver. Also, merging. Make sure you adjust your speed so you're not colliding into people who are merging at a snail's pace. Make sure when you're merging, you're not colliding into people as you merge, but that you're merging accordingly. If traffic is thick, we need to be using the zipper method. That's one vehicle after the other, just like the zipper on your pants or on your jacket. That's the same way with merging, whether it's an on-ramp, off-ramp, or merging at a lane termination for like a construction zone, or if it just goes from double lane to single lane. Make sure you are adjusting your speed so traffic merges smoothly. Use your turn signal to get in. That should be done before you approach the merge point. And make sure you cancel your turn signal if you're on an exit ramp or entrance ramp. Now, once in a great blue moon, I'll see people who will use their turn signal for the whole duration of the ramp. Don't do that. That will confuse people, because what you're doing in a merge situation is you're making a lane change. So if you're on the expressway, here's exit 100 for whatever place you're going to. You put your turn signal on, move into the off ramp or on-ramp, cancel your turn signal. Go through the ramp. Once you're at the other end of the ramp, you put your turn signal on to merge, move over, cancel the turn signal. And always work with the flow of traffic. Don't try to race yourself to be faster than the flow of traffic, because where are you going to go if the traffic is slower? And don't drive so slow merging in that everybody's forced to apply their brake pedal. Because like I said before, it's your responsibility to merge, not the people who are already on the roadway. So how does this connect to everything as far as what we've talked in these 5 videos? Vision helps you see what's going on around you. Awareness helps you understand what's happening around you. Space gives you options, and communication helps others understand your intentions. When everyone understands what's happening out there, the road becomes a lot safer place. So here's a key takeaway. Be clear, be early, and be predictable. Don't just drive. Make sure everyone around you understands what you are about to do. If you apply everything we've covered, looking ahead, staying aware, moving your eyes, maintaining space, and communicating early, you're not just driving anymore, you're driving with purpose and control. And that's the goal from the moment you leave point A and you arrive at point B. Now, I'm sure there are many of you out there thinking, okay, I've watched your 5 videos, and I get it, John. I put all this to practice, yet I have a collision by someone else, and it's not my fault. Now what? And I understand there may be collisions you cannot prevent whatsoever. It's going to happen. Not with everybody, but there are points here or there where it's going to occur. And I do want to propose an additional measure to protect yourself in the event you have a non-preventable collision. And that is to get yourself a forward-facing camera. Get yourself a decent forward-facing camera that mounts to your windshield. Make sure it's in a proper spot to where it's not going to obstruct your vision. Now, as far as laws regulating objects on windows that can obstruct your vision, you do want to put it in a place where it's not going to obstruct your vision. Or as far as regulations regarding devices like that, there are federal legal exemptions for devices like that because they are considered safety devices. Now, I don't recommend putting them down in the middle of the windshield. I would have them up like maybe behind where the rear view mirror is at, or maybe somewhere at the top of the windshield. I know there's some trucking companies out there putting these drive cameras right in the middle of the windshield, and they have fought federal regulators to allow that. And that's why that's now legal, which I'm not for that, when there are plenty of other companies out there putting Lytx and Sansera drive cameras up at the top of the windshield in a position where it does not obstruct view. And that's where a drive camera should go. Now, as far as inward-facing camera, that's up to you. If you're doing ride-sharing like Uber or Lyft, I would recommend having the inward-facing camera because you do have passengers. You want that more as a business necessity. As far as a rearward-facing camera, it wouldn't hurt to have a rearward-facing camera just in case something were to happen. Forward-facing camera is going to be more important because if somebody comes in front of you and does something stupid, that's where you will need the protection the most. In any collision, regardless of how it happens, you always want forward-facing camera. So I would definitely encourage you to get a forward-facing camera, get a good one. And you also want to make sure it takes an SD card. There are some cheaper ones out there that have a built-in source of memory. Don't get those. Because here's what can happen. A family I know once was in a collision and there was a fatality involved. And what happened was she had one of those cameras that had an integrated source of memory. She ended up getting struck by an 18-wheeler. Long story short, the camera was destroyed, and because of the integrated memory, the evidence was also destroyed, and it was valuable evidence as she had a runaround with the trucking carrier. And it did not pan out well for her because the evidence was just long gone. And of course, the police should have done a better investigation, I would say, especially when there was a fatality involved, because they are supposed to investigate those type of collisions in a deep forensic way, as opposed to fender benders that are usually file a police report and get your insurance claim and move on with your life. Now, of course, she learned her lesson and said she will not buy a camera like that ever again. She'll make sure it has a removable SD card. That way, if a camera does get destroyed, at least you can pop the SD card out of the camera. Hopefully the SD card doesn't get destroyed. Usually they don't. They can be put into a different device and the video recovered. And if she had that, she probably would have had different results. So make sure you get a decent drive camera. Now, if that's all you can afford right now, something is better than nothing. Get something on your windshield. Even if you have to take an old cell phone and duct tape it to your windshield temporarily until you can afford to get a device. Because I know a decent device can be a couple $100s. And if all you can afford is $50, get something for now, but plan to get yourself a good device that you can at least rely on. Well, everyone, this wraps it up for our 5-part defensive driving series. On the next video, I want to discuss pre-staged collisions that people can be a victim of, so you don't want to miss that. So be sure to like, share, and subscribe because you don't want to miss any future video that I'm going to release. So take care and be safe out there. Thank you.